Thank you for the survey. Section 1, what is causing the dampness?
So, thank you for the survey. Beautiful property. There has clearly been a history of damp issues, which is why you've got the continuous flow extractor fans that I see installed. Unfortunately, they only work if you also have heating on or ideally dehumidification. And you'll see in the data loggers section the benefits of dehumidifier versus having that sort of continuous flow kitchen extractor fan, and the same in the bathrooms. There is some undulation to that floor. The relatively high subfloor relative humidity, 85%. It's not off the scale, but I measured a very slight leak on your water system, and I think it probably comes from where the new stopcock has been put in, and I think you need to have a plumber investigate it. I will send the details separately of somebody that I know. I'm no financial interest in their outcome, and I've never met them. They're just from a client. Have a listen to the section of the data loggers and then on to the rest of the film taken during the survey.
Section 2, data loggers.
Here's the data logger system at damp.ai/detect. I'm just looking at the kitchen data logger and comparing it to the outside, and you'll see that the temperature is higher during the night and lower during the day. And that's very interesting because what happens in a vacant property is the external dew point can be greater than the internal temperature because you're blowing the air from the outside. And if it's raining and warm during the day, you can end up with condensation. And I think that is certainly one of the risk factors. Let's now have a look at the basement. I ran the dehumidifier at the time, and this is comparing the basement to the kitchen. And this is that the early element is when I was calibrating it, and you can see that there's a steady decrease in the relative humidity. There's a steady decrease in the internal dew point, this blue line, and this is the blue dew point differential, and we've taken out 2 liters of water, and you see how much improved the basement is compared to the kitchen by running a dehumidifier. Have a listen to the section film taken during the survey.
Section 3, the filming during the survey. Note some images or films can be upside down. Conclusions and observations can evolve. So I saw the surveyor's report, which I reviewed during the survey. It talked about roofing issues. I saw no evidence of that, but I wasn't specifically looking for that. I saw rainwater goods issues, and again, I saw no evidence of that on the inside, but it's always good to check during a heavy rainstorm. I saw discussions about subfloor ventilation, and I agree there is insufficient ventilation to the subfloor, but that's a belt and braces. The issue actually is high vapor levels in the subfloor, and I don't think they're coming from the outside. I think they're coming from the inside, specifically a mains water leak. So we'll look at that. I don't believe the property should have been damp proofed because damp proofing is against rising damp, and there is no rising damp in the area. Rising damp comes from groundwater, and in London, groundwater is pumped out, so it's effectively impossible. But clearly, there's an industry that has interest in tanking properties. I wouldn't have done it, but I wouldn't remove it either. The primary issue is vapor in the subfloor, which I think is coming from the mains water, and insufficient ventilation, specifically in the cellar. When you leave a property vacant, you shouldn't rely on ventilation alone. Have a look at the information in the data logger, but essentially, you can see a dehumidifier is much better than a so-called heat recovery ventilation system. So I quickly reviewed work done before the survey. I can't really comment on it, but I wouldn't have done the work myself. One thing that is good is that the external render appears to have been repaired. So the main finding is there is some dampness to the front wall deep down using a radio wave damp meter. At the base of the wall, the most common cause of that is high subfloor relative humidity and or high internal humidity. There's no staining, so it suggests that it's not passing through the building material, so it's unlikely to be caused by rainwater, although rainwater could be entering in the subfloor, but I don't think it is in this case. We got high subfloor relative humidity, so it's 78. It was showing 85% at one stage. When I put it in the night before, I left it overnight, and what can happen is condensation can form in the subfloor and condense above the damp-proof cores, causing rising damp-like symptoms. It's not rising damp, it's from condensation in the subfloor. You can see the brown stain. At the time of the survey, that was dry, but it shows that there's a historic dampness and there's mold around the cold water pipe. Now, those should be insulated. They may be not relevant, but they should be insulated. But I think what's happened is that there was a change in the stopcock, and I suspect there's a leak.
So this is doing a suckback leak test, and I think there's a bit of a leak.
So to explain, the suckback leak test is where you turn the stopcock off and have the tap open, but on some water, and if the water sucks back, then you know there's a leak. And in this case, we see the meniscus slowly falling away, so we know there's a leak.
There's a bit of a leak on the mains water.
So there's slight undulation to the floor, which may or may not be concerning. So there was obviously at some stage a leak to the heating system, but I didn't see any evidence of an ongoing leak. The pressure was normal. There's dampness at the top of the damp proofing treatment, but then that's probably just the building material drying out, nothing to be worried about. It's possible that there's some condensation forming there. You often get what's called damp proofers condensation at the ridge between damp proofing treatment and non-damp proofing treatment. But there's still drying out. I left the heating on because that had been turned off. And what can happen is in a property, it can become cold at night and the air from the outside can be blown in, causing mold and condensation in a property where the external dew point can often be greater than the internal temperature. There's mold, so that may well be a cause for that. I think that leaving a dehumidifier running in the subfloor void is a way of reducing the risk. Section 4, conclusions, recommendations. So I think the buyer surveyor is absolutely right to say there's insufficient subfloor ventilation. Subfloor ventilation is a safety mechanism should water enter the subfloor. What can happen is high levels of relative humidity can cause condensation above the damp-proof cores that rises like rising damp. It's not rising damp, it's whatever the source is, and in this case I believe it's a mains water leak, a very small one. I think it's from the change in the stopcock to the front, and it should be solved, and it's probably the responsibility of the freeholder